Ghosts of Brexit past, haunting politics once again. Boris Johnson isn't back, but sources close to him were briefing papers today with a warning to Rishi Sunak that it would be a mistake to ditch the bill Boris Johnson introduced to allow the UK to scrap parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol without agreement from the EU.
It's not an entirely unhelpful intervention. I think the Prime Minister would acknowledge that part of the reason why we've been able to make progress is what his predecessors did to get us there, the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill being part of that. But it's always been our preference for a negotiated settlement.
But to reach a settlement to end checks on goods travelling between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, we understand the EU sees dropping the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill as a logical outcome of any deal. Today, raised suspicions within the Conservative Party over the former Prime Minister's motivation to intervene.
Boris Johnson is interested in becoming Prime Minister again. If you wait for Boris Johnson to do the sort of grown-up, sensible thing, he's not going to do it if he thinks there's a political opportunity in causing trouble, and he wants to bring down Rishi Sunak, and he will use any instrument to do it. And if the Northern Ireland negotiations are that instrument, he will pick it up and hit Mr. Sunak over the head with it.
While Labour say they will support any deal the Prime Minister agrees, there's a growing rebellion in Westminster among Eurosceptic MPs, currently concerned that power to the European Court of Justice to oversee disputes is not getting Brexit done the way they were promised last election. It would also have to be an arrangement unionists could accept, and which wouldn't create what in effect is a border in the Irish Sea, which they say undermines Northern Ireland's place in the UK.
It seems to me that they're very close now. That's a very different question to whether or not the DUP will be happy enough to go back into government. But I think we're going to get to a point where they will get very many things that they ask for. They won't get everything because that's how it works. And they have to be ready to take yes for an answer one of these days.
Visiting Munich yesterday in attempts to resolve issues with the protocol, the Prime Minister said good progress had been made. A joint statement with Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, signalled a new deal over trade rules for Northern Ireland could be just days away. Details are expected to be briefed to ministers on Tuesday, at the start of a week which could see familiar Brexit rows return.
Well, a short while ago, I spoke to DUP MP Sammy Wilson, who is the Unionist Party's chief whip in Westminster. I started by asking him if he expected to be presented with a deal this week.
No, we don't. We've been given no timetable. We haven't seen any text of a deal so far. We have had vague outlines of what has been agreed, and it's been very, very little tinkering around the edges, really, about trade movements from GB to Northern Ireland, etc. But we've heard nothing on the fundamental issue, which is the application of EU law in Northern Ireland, which, of course, has caused a democratic deficit. Laws which apply in Northern Ireland, which we have no say over.
Well, the application of EU law in Northern Ireland is fundamental to the protocol, which Boris Johnson agreed. And of course, you gave Boris Johnson a standing ovation at your party conference some time before that. So do you not bear a responsibility to actually compromise and look for a solution?
No, we don't. Why would we wish to compromise on the integrity of the Union? Why would we wish to compromise on our position within the United Kingdom? Because basically the protocol makes Northern Ireland a colony of the EU. And of course, we did not agree with the protocol at the time. We voted against it. We argued that Boris Johnson was wrong, and I think he is now admitting he was wrong, and he's calling for the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill to be implemented.
Boris Johnson has said today, a source close to him, that leverage constitutes the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which would mean the UK government could alter parts of the protocol unilaterally. Do you welcome that?
I do, and in fact, we've been calling for that. And it's significant that rather than go into these negotiations with the strongest hand possible, the government continually seems to throw away any leverage it has with the EU. This protocol bill is stalled. They've already introduced legislation to put up border control posts in Northern Ireland, which would give an internal border within the United Kingdom. And they've agreed to exchange data with the EU ahead of any agreement with the EU about lifting the impact of the protocol. Well, so, you know, I think the government has used not used this leverage if now Boris Johnson is telling and saying to the government, this is something you should do, hopefully that will add to our voice as well.
Don't you think it's telling that the progress that's been made in recent days has been whilst that so-called leverage, as you put it, has actually been on the back burner? Rishi Sunak's taken a different approach.
No, because the progress which has been made so far is very slim and the fundamental issues have not been addressed. And we believe that the fundamental issues and minds could be concentrated to deal with the fundamental issue, namely that the EU still wishes to make laws for part of the United Kingdom. And that fundamental issue has to be addressed. It hasn't been addressed because the EU, all the EU have been talking about so far is improving the protocol, improving its operation. We believe that fundamentally the protocol is wrong for Northern Ireland, it's wrong for the United Kingdom, it undermines Brexit, and therefore it must be fundamentally changed. And I believe the government would have had a far, far better chance of achieving that had it had and held on to all the levers which it had available to it.
Labour's offered to support Rishi Sunak to get this through. So there is a scenario in which case this happens, whether you back it or not, and then you would continue with you being a roadblock to power sharing in Northern Ireland.
Well, first of all, if the government wishes to have the support of Labour, I think that there can be nothing more undermining for the government than have to plead with the opposition to get measures through in the House of Commons. But secondly, of course, we have made it clear that we will not be collaborate in our own demise as part of the union. Our boycott of the executive is not some petulant, truculent response to not getting our own way. To work in the executive as ministers, we would be required by law to implement the protocol, a protocol which we believe is damaging to our long-term future within the union. And you could hardly call us unionists if on one hand we said we want to maintain the union, and on the other hand we collaborated in a protocol which is actually going to destroy the union.
Sammy Wilson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.